What the hell just happened? That game that we witnessed on Sunday between the Bengals and the Jets had a little bit of everything. It had the Bengals offense scoring 5 touchdowns and another field goal. It had the Ring of Honor. There was drama around that going into the weekend. And somehow the Cincinnati Bengals lose the game to a winless team at home. Not a primetime game. Had extra rest, all that kind of stuff. The Bengals drop and collapse late against the New York Jets while holding for a good portion of the game a 2-touchdown-ish type lead. It varied at different points, but the Bengals were in control for most of the game. And then the fourth quarter hit, the middle of the fourth quarter hit, and it all hit the fan. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's John Sheeran. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and this is the Aftermath episode. We thought about taking the air yesterday, immediately concluding the game, but probably better we didn't. And some things have since transpired, even, I guess now, 24 hours after the conclusion of the game or 30 hours after the conclusion of the game. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about the defense. We will talk about what the future holds for this team, what this game meant, what it symbolized, all that, I guess, if you want to call it good stuff, but it's stuff that we got to talk about, and we will on this episode. And of course, this episode of the Orange and Black Insider, which is part of the Believe Podcast Network and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, is brought to you by FanDuel. There were probably a Jets contingent or casual bettors that probably had some fun yesterday. If they placed money on New York, they were 5.5-point underdogs. We were talking about that on Thursday last week. So we expected to be here talking about a win. I guess congratulations to those who went to FanDuel and maybe made some money off of this game, but we are grateful for the sponsorship by FanDuel. And of course, FOCO, the fans only company, exclusive Bengals merchandise is available. The links are pinned in our show description on our YouTube channel, so go check those out. And it's also on the Cincy Jungle article that we put up about the show and all that good stuff too. So go check those out. And by the way, while John and I are going to discuss a lot of things, if you want to air stuff out, I'm sure there's a lot of comments. We'll pin what we can here and talk about what we can in terms of the comments as well. We kind of want this to be maybe a little more interactive based on just John and I don't even know how we'll be able to explain what was witnessed here. But at any rate, as I mentioned, Orange and Black Insider, get it on your favorite audio streamer. Check out our YouTube channel at Bengals OBI. We also stream to a few different X accounts and the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. So check out all that good stuff. Okay. So where do we begin? As I mentioned, the weekend started off with a little bit of drama. We're not going to get too much into that, but apparently former running back Corey Dillon had some sort of travel issue, and the ticket agent at LAX airport told him that he needed to pay for the ticket. The ticket was booked but not paid for. Apparently the Bengals did reveal to some sources that it should have been paid for, and that was maybe an error by the airline. I don't know. I don't really know how it ended up, but it seemed like Corey Dillon didn't even make it out to the game. And aired frustrations on X. That's a different story for another time. The only reason I'm really bringing it up is because it really kicked off a weekend of just horrific headlines for the Bengals. Then the Bengals get out to a big lead. They get a couple defensive stops early. Joe Flacco's looking nice and comfortable. The Bengals take a 17-3 halftime lead. It looks like they are in cruise control. They end up running the ball well throughout most of the game. And I know, I just want to say this. I know some people kind of had some complaints about Joe Flacco's second half performance and the Bengals maybe sputtering with the pass defense a little bit. Understandable. But I also think they were in game management, ball control mode, and they were running the ball well. Samaje Perine had close to 100 yards. Chase Brown had close to 80. So I think they just kind of said, Joe, let the run game do its thing. It's working. And it was working. And then the middle of the fourth quarter hit, and inexplicable series of events happened, John. It was touchdown, a 2-point conversion that maybe wasn't. I think the nose was maybe slightly over the line there. It was very close. 2-point conversion. The Bengals defense absolutely collapses, and the Jets get out of there with a 1-point win, 39-38. The Bengals score 38 points on their home turf against a winless team, and somehow the Jets pull a rabbit out of the hat and get the win.
23 fourth quarter points against any team is inexcusable, but this Jets offense with Justin Fields, for them to do that on the road without having won a game at all this year, I don't know any way that you could possibly spin this. I don't know how you can point fingers to anybody outside of the people responsible for this calamity. And this is going to be a pretty negative show, so I want to just get out some positives.
Yeah. Deservedly so.
Unfortunately, the positives are mostly for the Jets. Congratulations to Aaron Glenn on his first win. Zach Taylor got his first win against the Jets back in 2019. It's a big moment. The Jets also dealt with pretty tragic news right before this game when Nick Mangold unfortunately passed away due to kidney failure. So I'm sure that many within the organization were pretty inspired about what happened here. And Justin Fields, who just got benched because, again, he had not been playing well. He got benched for Tyrod Taylor last week. He was crying in his closet. His words, not mine, leading up to this game. And he has one of the best games of his life because the Bengals defense beyond this game, Anthony, is terrible. It's terrible.
Awful.
And everything was exposed in this game, of course, because the Jets offense was not even, they did not believe that they were capable of putting up 500 yards with more than half of that on the ground. Breece Hall had been basically non-existent for this entire season. He throws a touchdown pass of all things, right? So like everything in that fourth quarter was just, it was the realization that this defense cannot hold up when it matters outside of the few instances this year when they create turnovers. And unfortunately, that was a talking point this offseason about how they were going to have to be more reliant on taking the ball away and being opportunistic. When that doesn't happen, nothing that we saw Sunday is even remotely sustainable. They have, and I'm not even exaggerating, they have zero pass rush. They had basically zero with a half-healthy Trey Hendrickson, who's only out there for 23 snaps until he re-aggravated his hip injury. Once he was out, there's nothing to be shown there. It doesn't matter how much your quarterback is struggling. If you're going against this Bengals defensive line, you're going to have all day to just make the decisions that you're supposed to make, or just make unforced errors, which sometimes, very rarely, Justin Fields did. But again, the Bengals couldn't capitalize on that. They couldn't get to him. They let him do whatever he wanted. And you saw as the game went on, the defense forgetting how to take angles, how to tackle. Demetrius Knight, Jordan Battle, no matter who it was awful. It was terrible. It was a clinic of everything not to do. And again, to do it against that team, the winless, confident-less Jets at home, after writing this high about what you just did to the Steelers, the division-leading Steelers 10 days prior, everything. It's the worst loss of Zach Taylor's career, and I don't know how you can argue against that.
Winless team. You're at home. Ring of Honor game. You had the mini bye. Quarterback issues with the New York Jets. To not only lose, but to lose by giving up 39 points, and as you said, 23 fourth quarter points. Absolutely inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable. And like you said, it was a comedy of errors. It was Knight missing tackles. It was Barrett Carter getting juked right when he had the beat right in the hole. It was, guys on run plays, guys are moving backwards moving backwards. And like you said, the pass rush was abysmal. Just a couple of weeks ago, I believe Justin Fields against the Denver Broncos, who do have a good pass rush. I think he was sacked 8 times. This game, there was one pressure that was documented by the Cincinnati Bengals defense. One. And or hurry, that sort of thing. He had all day to throw. And maybe some of that was by design because of his legs and because he can run the ball effectively. But that's inexcusable with or without Trey Hendrickson when you have a first-round pick on that defensive line. You have 2 former first-round picks on the defensive line. You have a second-round pick in Chris Jenkins. You have B.J. Hill, who you re-signed. That is just inexcusable. And like you said, the Jets started feeling it at the end. Like you said, it was the running back pass. It was the 2-point conversion. They just started pulling everything out. And it was, I don't know. There was just a lot of terrible, terrible pieces of film put out on display there. So I don't know. I don't know how you rebound from this. The Bears are now coming to town. They were winners of 4 straight. They lost Sunday, but that's going to be another test with a multi-dimensional Caleb Williams coming to town. And I don't see a light at least on defense. We're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel on offense. The offensive line is playing better. The running game has improved, and Joe Flacco looks very comfortable for the most part. You put up 38 points at home against a winless team. 99.9% of the time, you should win that game. So again, I'm a little speechless still over 24 hours later about this. And it looked like, again, it felt like the Jets got some points, and then the Bengals responded very well with a touchdown type of thing. And you're like, okay, this is just, they're going to let up some points, but this will probably be a 10-point, 14-point win based on how the entire game went. And that collapse, just stunning. Absolutely stunning.
I think it was in the middle of the second quarter, I want to say. Maybe it was around the end of the first quarter. The defense was clicking. They were clicking and closing. They were wrapping up. They were driving through tackles. Yes, they weren't necessarily winning as pass rushers, but the Jets look flustered on offense as expected. Like, that's just what their offense has been for this year. They haven't been able to find any answers, and the Bengals defense looked like they just knew that they were better. And I think there was confidence with that. And with the offense, continuing to find success, Joe Flacco getting in a rhythm, finding T. Higgins down the sidelines for a long touchdown, continuing to find Jamar Chase every single time that the opportunity presented itself, everything was kind of coming together in a way that you would have expected. And that's why the second half is so inexplicable to me, because I don't know what the mindset of the locker room and just the team in general is when things are going well, because they just didn't look like a team that knew how to handle that kind of success. I think they very much looked at the Jets as like, we're just better than them, and we're just going to handle business, and we're just going to kind of take our foot off the gas here, because that's just what I can't describe it any other way with how much the defense looked from the first half compared to the second half. Yes, it wasn't perfect entirely in the first half, but just the way that they just crumbled and just morphed into a corn cob. Like, Barrett Carter looked like a completely different player in the final 2 quarters compared to the first 2 quarters. He didn't get off the field because he's now the starter out there, and that's the bed that the Bengals are now making and living in. But like, he just was he and Demetrius Knight had just such unplayable errors out there, and that's just those are their starting linebackers right now, and they are just trying desperately to find consistency, and it's just not there. They're not filling their gaps. They're not succeeding their run fits. They're not setting the edge. Like, nothing here happened in the second half that's like warrants anything remotely close to what you would put in a clinic. It was just a comedy of errors that were just unrecognizable compared to what the first half was. And the problem is, Anthony, like you said, like, it should be enough. Like, it's very unlikely that you lose a game in which you score 38 points. The Bengals are just the exception to that rule, because this is the same thing as we dealt with last year, which leads into a much larger picture that we want to get to eventually. But yeah, I don't want to lament on the offense not being able to find those final points in the final drive, because that, again, that's just kind of We've found those very isolated incidents last year that led to some losses, but 38 points with Joe Flacco in his third start on this team, it should just be enough. And yes, again, there were some critical mistakes made on offense, particularly with the receivers and Flacco not being able to get the ball out. But it, I just don't want to look at the offense and in those final moments and say like that's a major reason why they lost this game, because 38 points again, it should be enough. It shouldn't have to be coming back to this. Oh well, like they just have to win shootouts. No, 38 points should be enough. That end of story there.
38 points as well, with no sacks by the defense and no turnovers netted by the defense. So there weren't the big plays on which to capitalize. And I would have loved to pull up the clip that we talked about last week where just play standard defense, where you just get off the field, you make those stops, that sort of thing. And I was just blown away by what I saw in those final two quarters from that defense in the form of lack of tackling. The setting the edge thing is just maddening, absolutely maddening. And unfortunately, when you lose a Sam Hubbard, a guy who was quite adept at doing that, at least earlier in his career, when you lose that experience, apparently it goes out the window, because Shamar Stewart was lost when it came to that regard. The linebackers and the defensive backs just crawled into a shell when it came time to tackle somebody. Like you said, the setting of the edge, guys, when backs got to the outside, it was home run ball time. And I don't get it. And the Bengals proclamation this offseason was that the defensive coaching changes, whether or not it's immediate, it was going to be immediate, that was going to be the fix. And you harken back to last year, I am almost of the mindset that this is worse.
It is.
Because you're not getting the Trey Hendrickson monster games. You're not getting, those stops, and maybe it comes to the point where it's a stop and then the offense sputters and you go, oh man, they finally get a stop, and you're not playing complimentary football. But I would contend that it's worse right now on defense than it was even last year. And last year was deplorable.
I think it's worse because like the most egregious examples right now, just it feels like it's tied to coaching. Jordan Battle being a free blitzer off the edge and stopping his feet to get his hands up to bat away a ball that he was never going to be able to touch that ball unless he got into Fields' face. I don't get it. The angles that he takes when he's the alley defender and he's coming up to the box, it's just like this guy. How this guy ever played for Nick Saban is beyond my comprehension. I don't get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Barrett Carter, the same thing. Like, he's in the hole and he's reading the whole play and he's there at the ball carrier, and the running back just bounces off of him. It's like he loses every single ounce of strength that he's built up for 22 years of his life. Same thing with Demetrius Knight. The guy just gets lost in the mud. And like on the 2-point conversion, he has the edge there, and he just goes inside to Justin Fields, and then Fields just runs around him. Like, he's way too good of an athlete to be thinking that much in that moment. So I don't know what the teaching points that these guys are getting from these coaches, but it's just not enough, because like you said, it's worse because we're seeing the young players that Lou Narumo didn't have trust in playing last year play now extensive snaps. And if the thought was that they were going to get better coaching, I don't think that they are. And this is the result of that.
So that we're going to continue on the defense, but that brings up an interesting point and something I've thought about for the last day or so. A lot of people obviously criticize the 2 linebacker picks, whether they felt it was reaches, whether they felt it was just not necessary, and you bolster other areas of your team. The bottom line is this, and this is a similar talking point that we've had over the past few years with offensive linemen. It's one of a couple or a few different things, because I seriously find it hard to believe, like you mentioned, these are guys who have been doing it at big programs, all-time coaches in some instances. How do they get to the Bengals and somehow regress immensely, or not reach potential or even close to that? Or, yeah, you're going to miss on picks. Every team does. I just am blown away at how, again, we had this conversation with the offensive line. The Bengals have now brought in some veterans. They seem to have picked a couple of guys in Rivers and Fairchild that could be solid players going forward. But how does this now happen and is happening on the defense where these guys, I find it hard to believe that they have just drafted a whole slew of terrible players. I find it really hard to believe that it's possible with the smaller scouting staff that they have more misses than others, but you're going to find good players. I just do not understand, like you said, where there are spurts where they're flying to the ball and they're making plays and this sort of thing. And then something happens and all of that goes out of the window. Horrible angles, horrible tackling. I mean, the Breece Hall touchdown run where he went around the right side, that was embarrassing. That was an embarrassing tackling effort, if you want to even call it that. So I don't have I have potential answers where you say, okay, front office, small scouting staff, you aren't getting the right players. But I seriously find it hard to believe that collectively the Bengals can't find good players at any level over the past handful of years. And that's why the defense is like this. Because now you are seeing with a coaching change, similar, if not worse, results. So I'm at a loss as to why this is occurring.
I think you're right in the sense of like they would have to stumble upon like good players for the most part on defense. I have zero trust in their ability to scout defensive linemen. I think that in and of itself is very clear that they cannot find guys who know what to do with their hands and know how to win and process as pass rushers. And that is very clear because you can see that on tape. Like they cannot hide from going up against offensive linemen and trying to win and get through them. I think when it comes to back seven players, they have identified, finding athletes in some regards. I think at the safety position, they need to work on that a little bit more. They get guys in position, but then once they're in position, they don't trust what they're supposed to do. And that leads to bad tackling, or that leads to bad angles, that leads to them kind of stopping their feet. And again, like I can't steer away from the fact that this is just bad coaching. And this is going against what I thought wasn't the case in week one, when they were in position to make plays on the ball and they were in position to make plays that mattered. And maybe that was just against the Browns, and, the Browns are the Browns. But I think as the season has progressed, again, this is beyond just this game. This is the worst defense in the NFL. If you want to look at this, the most basic stat that covers that, but going in with everything else, how the fact that they can't generate a single ounce of pass rush combined with the missed tackling, combined with the explosive plays given up, they can't get off the field without giving up a touchdown or the rare occasion of a turnover. Like it's not good enough. And it's just, yes, like they should stumble upon decent players every now and then. I think DJ Turner is a pretty good example of that, who unfortunately I think suffered an injury, but I think he played through it. Everything else though, it's just like, it's bad process.
Well, and we'll get to a larger conversation as well at this, but it is a organizational microcosm what's happening on defense, and that is it is a failure at every level of the defense. There's no pass rush. They're not setting the edge. They aren't tackling well or stopping the run with their front four. Then the linebackers are not taking good angles, not tackling well, not covering in space. Then you have struggles from the secondary. So it is a domino effect that occurs. And we know good pass rush, that sort of thing, that helps the secondary players and pass coverage, that sort of thing. But it is a failure at each level of the defense. And it is a massive failure, at each level of the defense. And I want to credit, I don't have the tweet pulled up, but a really good tweet by Jake Liskow of Locked On Bengals. He basically noted the Bengals ranks in major categories and kind of those, more analytical type categories. And they are basically 29th or lower across the board. And my response to that was, usually a bad defense is good at something. Getting off the field, maybe they rush the quarterback well. One or two things they do pretty well. This is EPA stuff. This is pass rush win rate. This is yards allowed. This is pass defense. I mean, across the board, across probably 7 or 8 different benchmarks, it is awful. And so, again, we can blame players. And you made the comment, John, and that spins it off into another direction as well, where, okay, they draft athletic players. Okay, well, are they drafting athletes and not quote unquote football players? Is it a scheme issue where you said maybe they don't fully trust what they're supposed to do when a play develops, and so that's where they get the stutter step thing instead of driving through a tackle? So that would be maybe confusion of scheme or coaching or lack thereof. I don't know, and we'll talk about this in a minute too, but you just ran out a ton of coaches out of town. And now there's this whole new cycle. Yeah, there's going to be growing pains, but these aren't growing pains. This is horrible at every level of the defense.
At this point of the season, you weren't expecting top 10, maybe not even like top 15, but you should have expected more than 29th, 32nd. Like, that's just what that we don't have to make it any more complex than that. We knew that this defense, like you said, was going to have growing pains. We saw those in the first handful of weeks, but you also saw some signs of growth, some signs of confidence. All that's just out the window now. Like, even last week against the Steelers, there were times in which, they were giving up big plays and gave up 31 points to a Steelers offense that didn't look particularly strong against the Green Bay Packers on Sunday Night Football. Like, you needed more than this. And yes, there's going to be weeks in which it looks better. I'm sure that you can't look at this game and not have it be some sort of a wake-up call. They're not going to be this bad every single week, but this is how bad it can be. And it can't be this bad if you expect to go far places in this league. You may be able to have some success here and there very sparingly, maybe towards the end of the season, like they kind of always do. But I think this just tells you pretty much who they are in a nutshell. And it's just not going to be that much better than this, only carried by, again, the nature of the NFL. There's 17 games. Naturally, you're going to look decent in some of them when you have talented guys. And they still do have some talented guys who can maybe potentially take over a game or not. But through 8 weeks, this is arguably the worst defense in the NFL. And you just needed to be more than that. The fact that it isn't is why they're here at 3-5.
It would be one thing if it was a 2-week, the first couple of weeks of the season or the first month of the season. We are now halfway through the season, basically, and it's a trend. It's a trend. I want to talk, because this is the aftermath episode of the Orange and Black Insider, I want to talk about some of the aftermath, particularly from the defensive meltdown. The first one was in Jamar Chase's crestfallen nature after and irritated, all kinds of different emotions. One reporter, I can't remember who it was, basically asked him something about Zach saying, they need to find a leader. Do you feel like, you should, I don't know how the question was specifically posed, but something to the effect of, should you have a hand in that? Should you help identifying who that is or whatever? And initially I kind of was, I don't know if I was taken aback, but Chase's comment was, well, that's not my job. And initially I was like, I don't know about that answer. And now I'm like, yeah, I mean, at some point, somebody on that side of the ball has to take ownership of what's going on, has to take this group by the reins and say, this is not only not good enough, this is horrible. This is horrible. So I don't know if you had thoughts on the Chase comment. There's another bit of news that we'll talk about in just a second too, but I kind of initially I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that answer from Chase, but now I'm like, I get it. I mean, Chase is putting up the numbers. The offense is putting up 30, 33, 38 a game the last couple of weeks, and they're 1-1, and one of the losses was to a winless team.
What is Jamar Chase supposed to do about the defense? Like honestly, Joe Flacco took to the microphone and was kind of asked like a similar question, and his whole point of it was, if everyone's just focused on their job, then you're not focused on other people not doing theirs, and then everything kind of takes care of itself. No one is more focused on his job than Jamar Chase, because no one does his job on the Bengals better than Jamar Chase. He has 54 freaking targets over the last 3 weeks. No one in NFL history has more targets in a 3-game span. He is handling enough on his plate, and he's doing everything in his power to carry the Bengals to some sort of success here. And obviously, they're only 1-2 in these past 2 weeks. But no, like Jamar Chase is not responsible for finding a leader on the defensive side of the ball. The problem, Anthony, though, is that when Zach Taylor says, "I'm looking for leaders out here on defense," my guy, the whole point of this offseason was to have this reset of a defense in which younger players fill in these roles, and then supposedly they're going to be better with better coaching. And that's great in theory, but when that doesn't happen, when you have guys continuing to underwhelm and not live up to their draft status, and clearly a lot more is being said about their abilities than maybe what the coaching ability was. If those guys don't develop, then they're not going to be leaders because no one's going to follow them when they don't put up the results. People are going to follow Jamar Chase because he's Jamar Chase, right? Who are they supposed to follow on defense? Probably Trey Hendrickson, Logan Wilson, BJ Hill, TJ Slayton, maybe. Two of those guys have reasons as to why they may not be so inclined to be leaders at this point. Trey Hendrickson is injured and doesn't have any long-term security with his team. Logan Wilson just got benched and requested a trade. Do any of those two guys want to lead right now? I don't know. I don't blame them if they don't. So then it's BJ Hill, who's just an okay defensive tackle who's regressed, by the way, as a pass rusher. And then TJ Slayton, who's just, again, a decent nose tackle. Like, I don't know where the leadership is going to come from this defense. And I'm not saying that they needed to keep around guys who were experienced but were liabilities at the end of their careers. But that's what you knew that's what you knew what would happen with this defense. When you knew it was going to be a youth undertaking, and when you don't necessarily put the veterans not in bad positions, but like when what happened with those guys happened, when which contract issues with Trey, and then obviously benching Logan Wilson, who's another one of your captains. This is kind of the situation that you're in. You have a void of leadership, and it's supposedly the new coaching staff is supposed to get the most out of them, and they're not. So, like, Zach, I don't know, man. Kind of feels like it's on you.
That is immensely well said, and it is part of Zach's job not only to identify those leaders, but to groom those leaders, and Al Golden's job as well to do that. And they are not doing that. Just one last thing on the defense specifically before we get to another segment. Monday morning, midday-ish, apparently, I believe it was Daneman, the reporter who first reported this. He noted that the defensive players had a players-only meeting. We've seen this happen before. It was under Lou Anarumo. I believe wasn't there one late last year, if I'm not mistaken. There could have been one, I think, more in early in Anarumo's. We've seen this. The merits and what comes out of stuff like that can be debated. Maybe it's a fix for a week, or maybe it is something that works magic and lights a fire under people. Obviously, players only, closed doors, all that kind of stuff. We don't know specifically, I don't think, who led it and or what was said in there. I guess it's a good look, but it's a good look only if it produces results. But nevertheless, reportedly that occurred today.
It sucks because, like, I think these things are good in a vacuum, or like they're good in general, but because it happens so often, it's so often reported, and it's always like the bad teams that do it. It's just kind of become a joke at this point. I think the Dolphins had a players only meeting, and no one really took that seriously. Of course, they played well against the Atlanta Falcons the other day, but even still, like, people know who the Dolphins are. People know who the Bengals are, man. Like, no one's taking them seriously. No one's taking the defense seriously, and they have to own that, right? I'm not accosting them for like taking this sort of accountability upon themselves, but like the solutions to their problems require so much more than just all 11 players just talking amongst themselves without the coaching staff. And it does say something about the coaching staff that they need to have this happen. So I get people making fun of it. I understand the value in it, but so much more needs to happen beyond this. This is just the very first, very small step one.
The issue with it, and you just brought it up, who's leading it?
Right.
Who is the person that you will rally behind? Because the two that readily come to mind aren't really incentivized to do this. Logan Wilson may not be here in the next few days. Don't know. Trey Hendrickson, like you said, injured, no long-term security, and this has been a battle he's been waging with the organization for two years now. And so you would think those are natural guys to step up, but given their own personal circumstances and their professional circumstances, why would they do that? And so who leads that meeting? TJ, you mentioned TJ Slayton. TJ Slayton's not a guy who's been in Cincinnati a long time. This is his first season here. Now, maybe he is a guy you listen to because he has come from a successful franchise in the Packers, and he is a veteran. Maybe it's DJ Turner because he is one of the few bright spots, albeit he had a rough game in some respects this last week, as did everybody. Maybe he's one of the guys that does it. I don't know. And again, to be a fly on that wall would have been interesting, but it could have been Trey. It could have been Logan Wilson. It could have been, hey, this is how you Marvin Lewis, be a pro type of thing. But I don't know. And I would not blame those two for not wanting to take the reins on something like this. But regardless, it happened, and who knows about the efficacy of it. But the Bengals held the defensive players held a players only meeting, and I don't know. We'll have to see exactly if that bears fruit against the Bears or what happens there. But this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe podcast network and the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV is how you spell it. And of course, Cincy, from the great Cincy Hat by Ted Karras, CINCY, Believe in Cincy podcast channel. So go get that through your favorite audio streamer. You can find us on X. You can find us on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, where we also post the articles that have gone up on the site, as well as all of our podcasts and the video streams there. I mentioned the X accounts and, of course, our YouTube channel. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, please do. There is a show icon, or if you're watching us on YouTube, click the little Orange Black Insider icon somewhere, and it'll let you know how to subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. We appreciate the positive reviews, and you sticking to us even after weeks like this where the Bengals are struggling. And speaking of struggling, as I mentioned, there were some contingent probably of Jets fans or NFL bettors that probably found some great results on this game, unfortunately, to the Bengals' chagrin. But where the Bengals are, 2.5 point underdogs right now to the Bears at home? I think that was the latest line. Yeah. So again, they are getting a little disrespected, but maybe again, the odds makers are feeling that this is going to be a shootout again, and the Bengals have to get to 35, 40 points to win this game. And we'll see if they do it. I can't really say it. You can hammer on Joe Flacco for the second half. I think it was 6 of 12 or 6 of 14, that sort of thing in the second half of this game. Joe Flacco is not the problem. He counted for 3 touchdowns and no turnovers. He has not been turning the ball over. He is finding his wide receivers. The one thing that I wish that was different, I think T. Higgins only had 2 targets. He had the big touchdown, but he only had 2 targets. You saw some throws to Yoshi late, and those just aren't connecting. So I don't know. But would you be inclined this week, players only meeting, at home, fortitude test by the Bengals right before the bye, would you be inclined to take the Bengals as underdogs in this one?
Hell no. I'm not taking the Bengals in any capacity. I might take the over because Chicago just only scored 16 points against another bad defense in the Ravens, and they're probably due for some sort of a bounce back in that regard. But yeah, I would definitely expect any offense going up against the Bengals defense right now to potentially overperform based off of what they're typically capable of against an average defense. Like at this point, they have to be treated as a confidence boost because that's definitely what the Jets just got.
Yeah. And the last 2 weeks have been razor thin point margins, whether it was a victory or not. So this is a tricky one. And go check out FanDuel, the lines, and obviously parlays and different stuff. We're appreciative of their sponsorship, and of course the sponsorship by FOCO, the fans only company, where you can get exclusive Bengals merch. Go buy a bobblehead and cry yourself to sleep huddling up with it or something. I don't know, but don't break it. They can be a little fragile. But thank you to FanDuel, thank you to FOCO for sponsoring the show. We're going to close with what's ahead. Now, the banner in the segment banner here says the future looks bleak. Let's start because you mentioned it was going to be a negative show, and because there's so much negativity after this, I want to start with some positives, and then I want to kind of chronicle where things have gone from Saturday through Monday. Positives: the AFC North is weak. Steelers lost again, and so what does that put them a half game still ahead of the Bengals in that regard? The Ravens only netted their second win. Browns are struggling. Joe Flacco looks good. Jamar Chase looks good. T. Higgins, when given the opportunity, looks good. The offensive line is improving. The run game is consequently improving. So there are positives when you look at this. Someone, I can't remember who said it in our comments, but someone made the comment 9-8 could win the AFC North, and right now that is a definite possibility. Unlike other years, though, there are not going to be multiple wild cards out of this division as it currently stands, even in a weaker AFC conference. So, with those positives comes some caveats too, but there are, when we were pleading for offensive improvement under Jake Browning, they've received that, but now the defense has regressed mightily. So there are positives to be taken away here, even though this is titled "The Future Looks Bleak," and this is not just about 2025. This is big picture stuff we're going to be talking about for a few minutes too. But I want to, in big picture, that's kind of where I want to go with the chronicling of events, so to speak, over the last couple of days. We mentioned the drama with Corey Dillon, whether it's founded, unfounded, whatever. It just started things off, whether or not you paid attention to it, on a bad note. This was supposed to be a celebratory weekend for the Ring of Honor candidates, and there's this, instead of talking a lot about Dave Lapham and Lamar Parrish, you got the Corey Dillon drama happening there. Again, I don't know the full extent of the details. If the team was just playing, PR cover up and said they did something and didn't actually do it, if Corey Dillon was mistaken, or if the airline was mistaken, there could be a myriad of issues there. Regardless, there's that. Then you have the loss. Then you have the Jamar Chase comments, that sort of thing. Then you have the players only meeting. And I think you follow him as well on X. I think his handle is at Cincy Suave, but he goes by Santori Miles, and he is on a podcast, Rally Round the Natty. He does some stuff on Bengals and Brews and Strawberry Ice and that sort of thing. He put out a tweet, and he messaged me it as well, that apparently on Monday, he had it on good authority that there were multiple hour waits to have that season ticket holders on the phone to cancel their season tickets. Again, I tend to believe him. He's a sharp guy and tends to be in the know. But this is now the domino effect that has occurred from Saturday through Monday. And that, as we stand here, there are problems, obviously, with the 2025 season. The Bengals are technically in it because of where the division stands in the weaker conference, but they have to improve things mightily to even have a shot. And then you have a bigger picture of, okay, we talked about how the defense is that domino effect from defensive line to linebackers to secondary, and we've talked about the up-down of the organizational issues too. You can keep running coaches out of town, but if your philosophy hasn't changed, if your player development stance hasn't changed, if you haven't done the right things as an organization, these problems are going to inevitably continue. So between 2025, the 2025 season, and between long-term, John, I know it's one game, but it was an epic failure of a weekend for the Bengals.
This is why. I don't think it has to be much more complicated than this. Last year was arguably the most frustrating season in recent memory because you had potentially career best seasons from both your two best players, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And it was a failure to not capitalize on that. It was a miracle that they got to 9-8 based off where they were, but they failed because they did not have a complete team around them. And to miss the playoffs for a second straight year with what you got from those two guys, it was a massive failure. And instead of having a complete reset on the coaching staff, they pointed the finger on the defense and they said, "Okay, Zach, you're gonna get a pass for this year, and you're gonna get a new defensive coordinator." And then they hired his actual next door neighbor to replace Lou Anarumo, and that's where they put all their eggs in the basket. They put their eggs and say, "Hey, get the most out of this defense, make it passable, get a similar offensive production, and go from there." To lose like that to the worst team in the NFL, it's such a backbreaker because it's the same exact loss that they experienced multiple times last year. Those losses essentially took them out of contention, of possibility of making the playoffs. To see it happen again and to see the defense get worse, and knowing that your actual quarterback is still 2 months away from coming back, knowing that he's in the middle of his career and these problems still exist, and you're still finding ways to lose exactly like this, you can't point the finger at the defense anymore. Obviously, they're the reason why they lost, but you can't say, "Oh, we'll just get a new defensive staff. We'll just get new faces on defense." It falls on the head coach. And people know that this team is just overly patient with head coaches in general. And if this continues to happen after their makeshift attempt at changing things, that's why it looks so bleak. That's why this loss couldn't have happened, especially like this. If you were going to continue finding ways to lose, despite your offense putting up the points that it did, it feels like nothing has changed. And if nothing has changed and you haven't played in a playoff game in 3 years, apathy is naturally going to be where it's at, because there's a difference between just being perpetually miserable like the Browns, but also just having the holy grail at quarterback and wide receiver and knowing that there's nothing you can do about it because you just can't do enough around them.
This is a game, and this is a situation, and I know he was hurt going into it, and I know he got hurt again in the game. And because of certain situations, it's not quite the Trey Hendrickson season that we've seen, but he still is effective when healthy and out there. This type of situation is where I, and I'm sure a lot of other people, get specifically very, very frustrated with what has transpired with the Trey Hendrickson contract situation. You have overvalued your roster in other spots. You attempted to play the leverage game in a number of different regards. Yes, you did give him a pay raise, so kudos there. But again, when you're talking about, we need to find a leader, well, you tripped over your own 2 feet in trying to reestablish leadership because you wanted to play hardball with your best defensive player and a guy who was runner-up to Defensive Player of the Year last year. And I don't know, man. Trey Hendrickson's a stand-up guy, and he's been a stand-up guy through this whole thing. I want to preface that. So he very well could be the guy that led the defensive meeting. It would not, even despite all the crap that has gone on, it would not surprise me if he was that guy who led the meeting, or he was the beacon of accountability for that defensive unit. But it would also surprise me, given his exhaustion with the team, that he is not. And I would not blame him, by the way. I know that's not towing the company line and all that kind of stuff. I would not blame him were that. I would applaud him mightily if he was the guy, and I would not blame him if he wasn't the leadership guy, based on everything that has transpired. Because here's the thing, John. If you represent a company, if you are a star employee at a company, I always use this business kind of correlation, because sports is different than business, but professional sports is a business when it comes down to it. If you are a representative and a star representative of a company, and that company is not treating you the way that, or compensating you the way that you feel that you are owed, or the way that you feel you have earned, how are you going to go to bat to fellow employees, to media members, to whatever, for said company? How are you going to, unless you're a liar, really, how are you going to really do that straight-faced? You're either a liar or you're the most stand-up person ever, really. Because that situation, when you see the defensive struggles, and I know, unfortunately, he got hurt again in that game, that situation just screams like, what what was the mindset there? What was the internal organizational mindset there? And again, there's this weird dichotomy with the Bengals. There's this loyalty aspect, and there's this overconfidence in who we are, who we have in the building. And sometimes it works out pretty well where the Bengals go on nice, runs for a couple of seasons. And other times you see that overconfidence or that complacency, as you put it, blow up in their face. And you saw that on Sunday. And I still am of the mindset. I know Zach Taylor's under a fine microscope. I know Al Golden, and they should be. But again, you can keep running all of these guys out of town. You can keep running assistants out of town. There just needs to be a major shift of players we target, coaches we target, profiles, scheme, all of that kind of thing, so that you are Mike Brown really values consistency, but this team has been wildly inconsistent. And I mean, my mind after this game, John, I don't know about you, but my mind after this game went a whole bunch of different directions. I almost found myself going, you know what? I like the choir boy mentality, and I like that where you can identify leaders and team captains and all that. There's value in that. But I'm almost like, you know what? Be the 05 bad boys again. Be get the guys that are fringe on the legality of play if they're nasty on defense. I don't, as a former coach myself, I don't really like that, but I'm almost like you need an edge. You need an edge to the team and an attitude, that sort of thing, particularly in this division. And the Bengals just have traditionally had that.
No, it was a couple years with Vontaze Burfict. That was about it. And we all saw the complications that came with that. I think
it's a short-term solution, to be truthful. It's a short-term solution, but I almost am like, to your point, and I don't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but I guess where my mind was going with that is, okay, now we are on a little bit of borrowed time with Burrow at this point, between the injuries, his age, and where he's at in his career. It's almost like maybe that short term, these guys that end up causing problems 3-4 years down the road, maybe that short term 2-year, let's get some nasty guys in here, let's take some risks. Maybe there's a tiny bit of wisdom in that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, again, like when things are crap, you want to try anything and everything, right?
Yeah.
No, I think it comes down to this, man. We've said this so many times on this program. This franchise, more than anything else, has to get lucky because of the way that they're stuck in their ways, and they just have to make one right decision or multiple right decisions in a row for things to work out, just to win one time. Not let alone sustain success. Just have success in 1 year, right? That's just that's why we talk about coach firings more than anything else, because we know that the fake GM of this team isn't going anywhere. He's not withheld to the same standards as any other GM around the league. It's why that nothing really changes in terms of their process of building out a team. Yes, it is through somewhat of the mindset and the mentality and the preferences of the head coach. But like you said, there are much larger problems than him. But the reason why we have to put him under the microscope is because that's the job of being the head coach of the Bengals. You have to be this middleman of disasters, from management to player relationships, and you have to do a lot more than what your pay grade is. So that's why if they continue to look like this and lose like this under this head coach, when you're in like you said, on borrowed time with your quarterback and your star wide receivers, you have to act quickly before that time passes. And that's why I think we're all now thinking that like maybe this is the time to do it. It doesn't have to be necessarily this week, but regardless, if they look a little bit better in the remaining, 9 games that they have this year, no matter how many wins that they have, I think we just kind of know who they are.
So, Pastor Dave, who's a longtime listener, thank you for always chiming in and tuning in. Emphasis has been all on offense, not on defense. I mean, they've drafted defense, and in 21, the off seasons of 20 and 21, the free agency were heavy defense, right? I mean, that's not coincidentally, they had their best years following those off seasons. But I want to say this: aside from that bad boy type of mindset, I also found myself thinking a little bit of, and part of it, part of that was because some of these guys were quote unquote bad boys, but that 09 to 0, oh God, I don't know, 09 to 2012 maybe, where the Bengals did the reclamation. And I don't know, off the top of my head, I can't think of some of those names, but that those guys who were former high picks that fizzled out, or guys that had some good seasons and fizzled out, be it from legal reasons or injuries or what have you. They did it a little bit with the Eli Apple thing as well, a few years back, but that a little bit of that, let's get the chip on our shoulder guys. Let's get the guys that we knew had talent but never realized it. And maybe that's a little bit free agency. I mean, you can go back Benson and Larry Johnson and Tank Johnson and Dhani Jones and all of those guys where they ended up having that mindset, that collective, like, hey, nobody else wanted us, but we've played well in this league at times. Let's do it. But they also had Mike Zimmer in the building, right? They also had guys that knew how to get more out of players. And I don't know. I don't know if that mindset resonates with you at all, but I'm like you. I'm just, and I'm sure like the Bengals coaching staff, I'm just clamoring for answers at this point.
They hired Al Golden to coach young players. Like at the end of the day, that's why he's here. And how much security he has is probably tied to Zach's security. And I can't imagine it's going to be pretty strong at this point if things continue like this. And again, I want to reemphasize this. There's going to be weeks in which they look better. There's going to be weeks in which they look inspired. They're not going to finish the season with just 3 wins. Like, they're going to have positive weeks, and we're going to come up here and talk about the good things that they did. But again, we have to remember this week, because it easily could have been the week prior when they only won by 2 the Pittsburgh Steelers. We could have been saying the same freaking things if that game had gone differently, but it didn't. And that's the NFL. But this team continues to lose in very similar ways to last year. And the fact that the head coach was given a pass for that, it can't be given a pass again. And that's what we have to remember.
I got a little bit of a noisy truck behind me. I apologize in advance. Brucey B saying, how long before we see a good defense again? I'm giving it another couple of years. I don't really see a light at the end of the tunnel anytime soon. And maybe we can end on this, and maybe this is a little bit of an ad hoc drop the mic moment. We talked last week, John, about what will the Bengals do, and maybe this Jets game and the result of it defines what the Bengals do at the trade deadline in terms of dealers, in terms of going after players. I think obviously the Bears game and that result will obviously have a play in that too. But at this point, and given where the AFC North is at, given where the AFC is at, and even at 3-5, they're technically in the mix, and a 2-0 division record, by the way. Do you see the Bengals dealing guys? Do you see them dealing 4 guys? Do you see them staying pat at this point, or what do you think?
I have no idea. I really thought that there was a chance that Logan Wilson was like going to be a healthy scratch because of what happened with him, but considering the fact that he was playing, I feel like they're going to be pretty adamant to hold on to him unless they get like an offer that is more than they're expecting from a team who's maybe desperate for a linebacker. I still don't see them trading Trey Hendrickson. I don't know what his value is even going to be now that he's dealing with an injury. He may not like play right before the deadline, but I still think that they see themselves as a team that can turn things around, and that's probably not entirely realistic. But unless something pretty drastic happens again in terms of like an injury, it's just hard to see them be aggressive in either direction.
I actually am in very much agreement with that, and I could see the Bengals being obstinate and say we have to develop who we have. These young guys, we have to develop who we have and continue to develop it and get through some rough patches. I don't agree with that personally, but I can see the Bengals doing that. I don't see Trey Hendrickson getting dealt. I could see Logan Wilson being dealt if that relationship has truly deteriorated to a certain level. But regardless, Bengals lose a bad one. we would be singing a different tune next week if they do somehow get the win against the Bears. If Joe Flacco continues to play at the level he is, if the running game continues to play the way it has been, and if this players only meeting ends up having some sort of effect, stranger things have happened. But right now the Bengals are in a tailspin, and it's going to be hard for them to get out of it. I don't know. We've kind of had a whole show of mic drop, so I don't know if you got anything else, buddy. I appreciate you. I don't have anything else, but just like I said, I feel like I maybe stumbled through this show a little bit just because of the inexplicable nature of the game Sunday. I guess the last thing I have is, again, lost in all of this has been and the fact that it wasn't a primetime game to showcase that. But congratulations once again to Dave Lapham and Lamar Parrish. Those are the people that we should be truly, I guess, talking about, or at least partially talking about, for their induction in the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, at least Dave got that moment at halftime, because I can't imagine how inconsolable he was at the end of the game calling that.
Yeah. Sometimes I listen to the radio calls, especially if they are, nice wins and that sort of thing. Obviously, I don't get that station readily, or the stations readily available out to me on just my AM radio or anything. But I find myself, going back or listening to that, and I don't think I could stomach poor Dave on that. Poor guy. I feel bad for him, but I am happy for him. Obviously, well deserved for the Ring of Honor. I think that's going to do it for us. John, I appreciate you. We appreciate all of you tuning in live or after the fact. We appreciate the Believe Podcast Network. Go get a slate of Bengals podcasts. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of great takes from different folks this week, be it Matt and Willie, be it the 3 and Out crew, Bengal Jim, all kinds of people. Go check that out. And our thanks to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and FOCO for sponsoring the show. Take care, everybody. John, you take care of yourself, and we will see you I guess we got to preview the Bears game. We'll do that later this week. See you.
Adios.